In a world where refrigerators have become essential, the Amish community stands apart, thriving without modern appliances. They've mastered food preservation with time-tested techniques passed down through generations. From lively kitchens filled with activity to serene pantries stocked with carefully preserved treasures, the Amish prove that creativity and tradition go hand in hand. While storing food without refrigeration might seem like something only survivalists or reality TV contestants would attempt, for the Amish, it's a daily routine. One of their best-kept secrets? Good old-fashioned water bath canning. If you've ever seen shelves lined with jars of pickles, peaches, or tomatoes, you've already glimpsed the magic of this method. It may look straightforward: put food in a jar, boil it, and seal it, but it's far from a beginner's project. My first attempt at canning peaches turned into a sticky disaster, with jars that refused to seal and a sudden realization: surviving the apocalypse might not be in my future. For the Amish, however, this process is practically a science. Each jar is meticulously washed and prepped, filled with fruits, vegetables, or sauces, and carefully lowered into bubbling pots of boiling water as if embarking on a deep-sea mission. The heat eliminates bacteria or mold, sealing the jars for long-term storage. These jars can last years, making it feel like time travel. Your 2034 meal could feature tomatoes harvested this summer. Some canned goods remain fresh for over 5 years if sealed properly. The real challenge, though, isn't the boiling or timing. It's resisting the temptation to open those jars early. Canning isn't just a skill for the Amish. It's an art form and a practical solution for times when crops are scarce or the weather turns harsh. Winter storms? No problem. They simply reach for home-canned potatoes and start cooking. And here's the best part: the taste. Unlike frozen vegetables, which often lose texture and flavor, canned goods stay vibrant. Amish pickles snap perfectly, and a canned peach tastes like summer sunshine in the middle of winter. All of this without ever needing a fridge. This method has endured for generations because it's reliable, cost-effective, and simple. There are no electricity bills, no concerns about power outages ruining food, and no fiddling with temperature controls. Just jars, boiling water, and wisdom passed through the ages. When most of us see a pile of ash, we think dirty mess. But for the Amish, it's a hidden gem for food storage. Eggs, for instance, are packed in containers of clean, dry ash, each one carefully nestled as if it's a treasure waiting to be uncovered months later. And it's not just eggs. Root vegetables like carrots and beets can also enjoy the same treatment. It's like wrapping them in a cozy winter coat, ensuring they survive the cold months without sprouting or turning mushy. The secret? Patience. And trust me, the Amish have that in abundance. Timing and technique are everything. Bury food too soon or use damp ash, and disaster is guaranteed. When I first tried storing eggs in ash, it felt more like a chaotic science experiment. I buried the eggs so deeply, it was like I was preparing them for an asteroid strike. A month later, I couldn't find them without scattering ash all over my kitchen. Lesson learned: moderation is key. It's also important to use the right kind of ash. Only clean, untreated wood ash will do. Forget about the leftovers from your scented pine logs or treated wood. Those won't work. The Amish, of course, have mastered this technique, turning simplicity into a fine art. It's the same kind of intuitive genius as making a perfect pie crust without measuring anything. Ash has been a quiet hero for centuries. Even the ancient Romans used it for food preservation, and it remains a go-to method for those who value deliberate, time-honored ways. Honestly, it makes you wonder, why aren't more of us trying this? Instead of using ash for food storage, we're roasting marshmallows or burning receipts in backyard fire pits. Not that there's anything wrong with s'mores, but the Amish see leftover ash as pure preservation gold. Speaking of preservation, picture a world where butter isn't just a kitchen staple, it's a food-saving superstar. The Amish have perfected another old-school technique: preserving cooked meat in melted lard or tallow. This creates a smooth, airtight seal that blocks out oxygen, giving bacteria zero chance to spoil the food. Think of it as nature's Tupperware, minus the missing lids we always lose. These methods may seem unconventional to the modern eye, but they're timeless, low cost, and incredibly reliable. And if someone walks into your home and sees eggs buried in ash, they might think you've lost your mind. But trust me, when their store-bought eggs spoil, they'll be the first to ask for your preserved stash. Isn't that when it comes to preserving meat, the Amish take it to another level. We're not just talking about any meat here. Bacon, sausage, and even duck have all taken long, cozy swims in fat baths. These airtight fat seals keep the meat fresh for months, as if it had just been cooked. I'll admit, the first time I tried sealing a roast in lard, I felt like I was auditioning for a survival show. Fast forward 2 months, and when I finally opened that jar, the meat was so tender, it was like it had spent the past 8 weeks at a luxury spa. My family, though, not so impressed. "Are we really eating this?" they asked with raised eyebrows and a hint of fear. I assured them it was perfectly safe, but let's just say I didn't win any trust points that day. The beauty of fat sealing lies in its simplicity and effectiveness. By completely blocking out air, the food becomes inhospitable to bacteria, which means no spoilage. This isn't just about survival, it's also about flavor. The fat locks in moisture, making the food taste even better after some time. It's like marinating, but with no expiration date in sight. And if you think this is just some quaint old-fashioned trick, think again. The French call it confit, and it's been their secret weapon for centuries to keep duck legs juicy and delicious. If it's good enough for French chefs, it's good enough for anyone. The best part? You don't need any fancy equipment. All it takes is a jar, some fat, and patience. But here's a pro tip. Make sure to filter your fat well before sealing. Otherwise, you might find unexpected crispy bits in your meal. While some might enjoy a surprise bacon crumb here and there, I can confirm from experience, it's not always the thrill you're looking for. Now let's talk about fermentation. While it may seem like a hipster trend, with kombucha ruling the yoga pants crowd, the Amish have been fermenting food for generations. This method is the ultimate in simplicity, letting nature work its magic. Sauerkraut, pickles, and beets are all transformed through fermentation, where natural bacteria feed on sugars to create tangy, long-lasting staples. If you think fermenting is as easy as throwing some cabbage in a jar, think again. It's a delicate balancing act. Leave it too long, and your sauerkraut might smell like it came from a gym locker. Too little time, and you're left with limp cabbage and salty water, hardly an improvement over a sad salad. My first attempt at sauerkraut was memorable. I proudly declared I was channeling my inner pioneer. But when I opened the jar weeks later, my kitchen filled with an aroma that could clear a room. My cat refused to enter the kitchen for days. However, beneath that funky smell was some of the crunchiest, most flavorful kraut I'd ever tasted. Fermentation's history makes it even cooler. This isn't just a modern survival hack, it's ancient. Archaeologists have found evidence of fermented foods dating back 9,000 years. Imagine ancient humans munching on tangy, fermented goodies while constructing the pyramids. If it worked for them, it's definitely worth keeping alive today. If it worked for ancient civilizations, it certainly works for the Amish. Fermented foods aren't just about preserving. They're about making food last and getting better with time. The longer they sit, the more the flavors deepen, almost like they're aging to perfection. Imagine thinking your first batch of sauerkraut is good, then trying it 6 months later and it's even better. But here's a word of advice. Always label your jars. I once confused sauerkraut with pickled beets, and let's just say the surprise was unforgettable when I opened the wrong jar. Fermentation is about more than survival. It's about culture. Pun intended, of course. When you ferment food, you're not just putting it in jars. You're preserving flavors, memories, and old traditions. The Amish have passed down these techniques for generations, just like their recipes and quilts. No Wi-Fi, no refrigerators, just salt, jars, and a lot of patience. And let me tell you, this method isn't just good for the taste buds. It's a nutritional powerhouse too. No preservatives, no chemicals, just natural probiotics that outshine anything you'll find in those tiny overpriced bottles at health stores. For those who grew up hearing "eat your vegetables," The Amish have figured out a way to make you want to eat them. It's all about letting them ferment. Now let's talk about drying food. You know those bags of jerky you see at gas stations? The Amish probably look at those and think, amateurs. For them, drying food isn't just a snack for road trips. It's a matter of survival. Long before electric dehydrators existed, they were using the sun and wood-fired ovens to remove moisture from meats, fruits, and vegetables. Less moisture means less risk of mold or bacteria, which helps the food stay fresh for years, even decades of storage. Have you ever tried sun-dried apples that are over 10 years old? They're still surprisingly tasty, though, like Grandpa's jokes, dry but still memorable. I visited one Amish family that had shelves filled with dried apples, pears, and even venison strips. When you've got 7 kids to feed, as the dad explained, you quickly learn how to make food last. And those kids? They were fast around food, understandably so. What's wild is that some dried foods, when kept in the right conditions, can last up to 20 years. Imagine finding a jar of dried tomatoes in the back of your cupboard, older than your teenager, and it's still good to eat. Drying food isn't just about survival, though. It also saves space and weight, which is why it became a staple for farmers, travelers, and even astronauts. That's right. NASA borrowed from these age-old drying methods when planning space meals. I once tried drying apple slices in the sun on a wooden tray, thinking I was channeling my inner pioneer. But after a few hours, I came back to find the tray completely empty, and my neighbor's dog sitting there with a satisfied look on his face. Lesson learned. The Amish not only know how to dry food, they know how to protect it. The trick is finding the right balance. Too much moisture and mold sets in. Too little, and your food becomes as hard as a rock, like jerky that could double as building material in a pinch. The Amish also have perfected drying meats in wood-fired ovens. The process is functional, of course, but it also smells amazing. Stepping into a room with drying meat feels like walking into a gourmet restaurant where the menu is survival food. Fun fact, dried meat wasn't just for emergencies, it was also a snack. Imagine chewing on a piece of dried venison while tending the fields or building a barn. No need for energy drinks when you've got that kind of fuel. Finally, if you think treasure means gold coins, you might be missing out. For the Amish, a well-stocked root cellar, filled with potatoes, carrots, and apples, is worth more than any buried chest of riches. Root cellars are like nature's refrigerators, but without the hum of electricity or risk of a power outage. Tucked underground, these cool, dark spaces maintain the perfect level of moisture, keeping food fresh all winter long. Ever wonder why root vegetables never seem to stress out about shelf life? It's because they thrive in these cellars, where the temperature stays steady no matter what the weather's doing outside. The cool air and balanced moisture prevent spoilage, kind of like a strict hall monitor, always keeping the shelves in check. When I visited my first root cellar, I honestly thought I'd stumbled into a farmer's version of Narnia, walls lined with bins of potatoes, carrots, and other winter treasures. Imagine rows of shiny apples in a root cellar, like little jewels just waiting to be plucked. This ancient storage method has been around for over 2,000 years. The Romans used underground pits to store food, though I bet Caesar would have traded his laurels for a few of those crunchy Amish carrots tucked away in their root cellars. And here's something even better. Apples stored in root cellars actually taste better after a few months. They soften just enough, and the flavors mellow out like a fine wine, without the headache the next morning. On a personal note, stepping into a root cellar feels a little like entering an old library, minus the books but with a lot more turnips. There's something incredibly satisfying about knowing that all this food will last without needing a single watt of electricity. It's also a good workout. Trust me, carrying buckets of apples up and down those cellar stairs will make you rethink complaining about carrying grocery bags. I once volunteered to help load a friend's cellar for winter, thinking it would take a couple of hours. By the time we were done, I had carried so many pumpkins that I could practically feel my biceps demanding union rights. What's even more interesting is how the Amish turn root cellars into community hubs. Neighbors stop by to exchange tips, trade produce, and share a laugh about how the old turnips in the corner still look better than most of us on Monday mornings. One elder told me the secret to happiness is keeping your root vegetables well stocked and keeping your neighbors guessing about how you do it. Now let's talk about salt. It's not just for seasoning your fries. It's a food warrior that has fought spoilage for centuries. In fact, entire economies used to be built around salt. Roman soldiers were even paid with it. No wonder the Amish still use this ancient trick to preserve food. When you pack something in enough salt, you're not just adding flavor, you're waging war on bacteria. The Amish salt down everything from meat to fish, layering food inside barrels packed with coarse salt until it looks like a snowdrift. Salt works by pulling moisture out of the food, and without moisture, bacteria can't thrive. So the food stays good and even travels through time. Some salted fish has been known to last decades. That's right. This method is older than fridges and probably has more staying power than my New Year's resolutions. I tried salting a ham once, thinking it couldn't be that hard. Spoiler alert, it was harder than a calculus exam. Salt got everywhere, between my fingers, under my nails, and somehow even into my shoes. And did I mention how heavy a fully salted ham is? Wrestling with a slippery piece of pork in brine is like trying to carry a toddler in the middle of a tantrum. But in the end, the ham lasted and tasted amazing. The only downside? I may still be finding salt crystals around my kitchen. Salt-cured food is not for the faint of heart. It takes patience and a lot of salt. But if done right, it rewards you with meat that tastes like it just came off the smoker. Even years later. And then there are pickles. They're not just sandwich buddies. They're the true superheroes of food storage. The Amish have mastered the art of using vinegar to preserve foods long past their expiration dates. It's pretty brilliant, actually. What starts as a humble cucumber can end up outliving the bread it was meant to sit on. The magic of vinegar lies in its ability to make foods untouchable to bacteria. It's like giving your food a secret agent's escape plan. Of course, the Amish pickle cucumbers, but they also pickle other vegetables, turning them into long-lasting, flavorful staples. The Amish don't just pickle cucumbers, they pickle eggs, beets, and even onions. Who knew that vinegar could pull double duty as both a salad dressing and a preservation wizard? Pickling isn't exactly new, though. Historians say the ancient Mesopotamians were at it long before Caesar thought about conquering anything. But when it comes to perfecting pickling, the Amish have truly mastered the art. Here's a wild stat. An unopened jar of vinegar-pickled food can last for over 5 years. That's the kind of shelf life that makes modern expiration dates seem laughable. When I tried making my first batch of pickles, I learned a hard lesson. One wrong move with the salt-to-vinegar ratio, and you either end up with food that could strip paint or pickles that are softer than old chewing gum. My family bravely tasted the first batch, but let's just say they've politely avoided my pickling experiments ever since. There's something oddly poetic about a jar of pickled eggs. The creamy whites float serenely in the jar, just waiting for their big day. They're the food version of an old friend, reliable, unchanged, and always ready to surprise you at a potluck. But here's a quirky thought. If I were a cucumber, I'd sign up to be pickled too. Who doesn't want immortality in a jar? It's funny how simple solutions like these make high-tech gadgets seem kind of unnecessary. And just when you think you've seen it all, the Amish bring in another timeless trick. When you think of smoked foods, you might picture backyard barbecues or holiday feasts. But for the Amish, smoking is a clever way to keep meats deliciously fresh for longer. Smoking isn't just a culinary delight, it's a preservation method that has stood the test of time. As the smoke dances around the food, it forms a protective layer that helps fend off bacteria, making it a practical choice for the Amish pantry. The process begins with carefully selected cuts of meat or fish, which are hung in a smokehouse to absorb those smoky flavors while drying out. The smoke contains chemicals that inhibit bacterial growth, which is what makes smoked foods last much longer. In fact, when done right, smoked meats can stay good for up to 2 years. That's like having a gourmet delicacy on standby for your next family gathering or surprise guest. You might be wondering what else the Amish smoke besides the usual hams and sausages. Well, they also smoke fish and cheeses. Imagine pulling out a chunk of smoked cheddar from your pantry, delicious and ready to impress. The art of smoking food isn't a recent trend. It dates back thousands of years. Early civilizations discovered that smoking not only enhanced flavor, but also extended the shelf life of food. Talk about a win-win. I remember my first attempt at smoking chicken wings. I had all the excitement in the world, smoke billowing, meat sizzling, the whole shebang. But when I finally bit into that wing, I realized I had been a little too ambitious with the spices. My taste buds were in a spicy war, and I was just trying to enjoy dinner. It was a reminder that while smoking can be an art, it also requires a delicate balance. It's important to keep your flavor profile in check, especially when you're smoking meat. The smoky goodness permeates every bite, creating a flavor that's both rich and comforting. No wonder this method has become a staple in Amish food preservation. It's a culinary craft passed down through generations, keeping their tables filled with both flavor and history. But the Amish don't just rely on smoking to preserve their food. Herbs do more than just add a sprinkle of flavor to mashed potatoes. They can also act as your food's best defense against spoilage. When you think of dried herbs, you might picture Grandma's spice rack. But in Amish kitchens, these bundles of green goodness are much more than flavoring. They're like a secret weapon for survival. Herbs like rosemary and thyme are packed with natural antimicrobial properties, making them fantastic for preserving food. Instead of letting those tasty greens wilt away in the fridge, the Amish dry them out and hang them from the kitchen ceiling. There they patiently wait to add zing to everything from soups to stews. You might be surprised to learn that thyme's history goes way back. Ancient Egyptians used it to preserve mummies. Yes, mummies. So when you sprinkle thyme on your beef stew, you're connecting with thousands of years of culinary history. It's like having a culinary bodyguard in your spice cabinet. In the Amish way of life, dried herbs serve a dual purpose. They bring flavor and keep food fresher for longer. Imagine a winter stew bubbling on the stove, filled with vegetables from last summer's harvest and herbs dried months ago. That's the kind of hearty meal that warms the soul and helps you get through the cold months ahead. Speaking of drying herbs, I had my own kitchen adventure once when I tried drying oregano from my garden. I was all set to have enough to season meals for months, but my cat had other plans. Every time I turned around, he was sneaking off with a leaf or two, treating my oregano like it was catnip. Lesson learned, I should have hung it higher or set a cat guard. The Amish approach to dried herbs is more than practical. It's a nod to their deep respect for nature and its gifts. They know how to make the most out of what they have, ensuring that nothing goes to waste. That bundle of thyme hanging from the kitchen ceiling is more than just a spice. It's a symbol of resourcefulness and creativity, traits that are essential to their everyday lives. While most of us might head to the store for fresh herbs that wilt faster than you can say, dinner's ready. The Amish have mastered the art of preservation. They turn herbs into a reliable pantry staple that not only spices up a meal, but also keeps it safe. Just like that trusty old jar of pickles, dried herbs are part of the Amish toolkit for thriving without a fridge. They've proven time and again that innovation can come in many forms, often with a side of humor and a dash of history. While most of us would panic at the thought of a fridge breakdown, the Amish merely shrug and chuckle. Their food storage secrets have kept them thriving for generations, showing that you don't need modern appliances when you have creativity, tradition, and a pinch of salt. Imagine the time you popped open a jar of homemade pickles. The crunch, the tang. There's nothing quite like it. I once tried to impress my friends with my own batch of pickles, but let's just say they ended up being a little too experimental and required a strong stomach. But hey, that's part of the journey, right? Learning from our pickling flops just adds to the charm of home preservation. And while we're at it, wouldn't it be nice if we could store memories the way the Amish store vegetables? Think about those family gatherings filled with laughter, shared recipes, and the delightful chaos of cooking together. We could all use a little more of that in our lives.